Good evening. How's everybody?
Good evening. Doing good.
Great. It's about turn summertime again. I'm hot. Had to turn the fan on. As soon as you turn the heat on, you got to turn the fan back on. Way it works. Hey, Lordy. Oh, man. Let me share my screen. It's good to see everybody. Let me see. Let me do a share screen. And we'll get our schedule up here. All righty. Well, what's going on in the world of work? Anything exciting happening in the world of work? No, nothing. Okay. Got another. Let me get my list here. All right. I see it's about time. We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for being with me. Those can join in. First thing is we always do. Welcome back. We'll look at our schedule we have this week and the next 3. So we've got 4 weeks. This week we do exceptional children this week, and then we got special pops, human resources. We got all these different modules, and then of course we end up our weekend is the 23rd and 24th is when we end up, the weekend before Thanksgiving. Just a reminder, I see 6 of you: Mindy, Katie, Andrew, Heather, Anne Marie, and Beth have already finished your app sale. If you haven't finished your app sale, make sure you knock out your app sale for the first half of the course. I hope you've started on the OMA. If you have any questions on that, let me know. So that's where we are. We'll meet the next 4 weeks, knock out our content, and then I'll close that one. Our case studies will be the last, and here are the case studies groups that we came up with. Group 1 is Alicia, Beth, Natalie, and Heather, Andrew, Mindy, Katie, and Anne Marie. So there's your case study groups for our last weekend. So that's again November 23rd. All right, so tonight we're doing exceptional children. But before we get to that, we always do our weeklies. And so our star for the week on our discussion boards was Beth. Both her and Natalie finished discussion board 1, and Beth did 1 and 2. So she's the star of the week on discussion boards, her and Natalie. So let's look at our discussion boards right quick. Our discussion boards for 1, and I'm going to pull this one up from Beth. So locate copies of your school emergency crisis plan. How long did it take your administrator? All right, as Beth pointed out, he went through the files, printed it online, took him over 5 minutes. It's not much of an emergency plan if it takes you 5 minutes to find it. They're only effective if you find them, they've been communicated, and they've been practiced. Um, one of the fairly recent superintendents in CMS in Charlotte Mecklenburg. There was a lot of things wrong with him, but the straw that broke the camel's back when there was a shooting at Butler High School, and nobody knew they didn't have a crisis plan in place. The crisis plan has a lot of different pieces and parts to it, but central to that is evacuation. You're supposed to have 3 evacuation sites, one on your campus, one you can walk to, and one that you can be bused to. Well, when the shooting occurred, tragedy, a kid was killed in the front lobby at Butler High School, but nobody knew where to go or what to do. Some parents thought they were on campus. I mean, they were just scattered all over the eastern part of the district. Some had walked to the church, which was the evacuation to walk to. Some had gone to the ball field. Some had gotten on buses and gone to the Coliseum. I mean, it was just crazy. You have to have an evacuation plan goes with your crisis plan. There must be 3 locations. Again, one like the ball field on your campus, someplace you can get to off campus, and then the place that you're bused to that you would go and aggregate there where could have those. And so, but it starts with making sure you have a plan. Everybody's got it. It should be in your crisis box underneath the first counters where everybody knows the crisis response teams that come in, the police, fire, emergency know where it is. Should have up-to-date class list. Your data manager should update the class list every Monday. Now, I get people all the time who tell me, oh, well, we all have it on our phones. And even Beth pointed out, first thing in an emergency, when the phone goes down, then you've got nothing. If you lose your power or cell, just like the hurricane, I'm back in Lake Lure tonight. Problem was, I didn't know what was going on other than I could hear sirens going off because I had no power. I had no phone, no internet, no nothing. In an emergency, that's not good. If you don't have printed copies. So in that crisis box should be a class roster that was printed within the last week so you know where your kids are. Don't depend upon the power and the internet and the phones being working. All right. And again, they're only good if everybody knows them and everybody knows the same one. A lot of times when you pull out all those rosters and who the responders are, if they hadn't been updated, some of those people don't even work at your school anymore. So that crisis box should be underneath the front desk in the front reception area. There should be one there that has all the materials in it. Again, it should have maps of the school, all your utility shut off locations where you can turn the water or the power or the gas off. Now, I'll tell a story on myself. Now, I'm not making this up. I did this. I am not proud of this. But when I was in high school, I was in chemistry class. I was in chemistry lab. And Henry McGinnis was at the lab station next to me. Y'all know the old lab station, old table with the black tops on them we used to have in chem labs. Some places still have them. And they had, you had your sink and you had your gas connections. And Henry got his Bunsen burner out and attached the hose in his burner. He turned his gas on and then started looking for his striker. So after about 30 seconds, as I stepped back, I said, here, use mine. The fireball that went through the roof of that building and took Henry's bangs and eyebrows off. Had to be the valve had to be shut off to the room because we had to evacuate, obviously. But that absolutely happened. And so that's one of the things I see maps in these boxes, but I don't see all the shut-offs, just like the valve at the gas station to cut the gas off. All those things need to be marked. All this stuff happens. Now, the follow-up to that is your assessment inventory. And Beth attached hers on that one as well. I'll share that. Welcome, Dr. Niels. Good to see you. She said the plan wasn't appropriate because it didn't have all the pieces and the parts and the safety plan. And then when they did a walkthrough, that also exemplified that as well. Propping doors open. How did the perpetrator, the last one at Uvalde, get in? The cafeteria ladies, it's hot in Texas, prop the door open. The perpetrators walked in. Doesn't do any good to have all that security at the front if you can just walk in the back. And then the classroom where they went and killed all the children, the door handle was locked, but was broken, couldn't be locked. They had noted it on the report. Well, that doesn't do any good. And so the assessment inventory in North Carolina, the law is very clear, 288, you have to do that twice a month. Same thing in South Carolina. You have to assess your building twice a month, and you have to have a written report of that. And again, when something goes wrong, the people in the central office will all have amnesia that they didn't follow through with you on any of this stuff. You're responsible for that building from top to bottom as a school administrator. And when something goes wrong, the maintenance people will swear they never heard, they didn't know it. Everybody will just all of a sudden be struck dumb, like a pillar of salt, like Lot's wife, when the blame comes rolling down the hill. And you've got to understand that you can't depend on these people. Well, I turned it in, they'll take care of it. No, they won't. And if they don't, then you're the one's going to be responsible, because it says you are in the law. Under duties and responsibilities of the principal, it says you are, not the maintenance crew, not somebody over at the bus garage. No, it says you are the person responsible. The law is very clear in that. So you better know. All right, now on the budget. The thing about budget is we have federal, state, local, and then school funds. Your budget should reflect all four of those. Law says that you will make that budget available to parents and interested parties. It is not a secret. It can't be a secret. Now, one of the things about the budgeting priorities, one of the things that bothered me about this is the first one, following all laws and procedures, procurement to ensure everything of a certain amount. That's purchasing. That's not budgeting. Budgeting is the decisions, the priorities that you make on how to spend the money, not the accounting for the money that you spent. That's accounting. Budgeting is planning. What are your priorities? Again, who should help you set those? The school improvement team, and they should mirror what the needs of the school improvement plan. That's how it's supposed to work. Back to that triangle. The school improvement plan's at the top. It is supported by the master schedule and the budget. We ought not be thinking about putting closets in the room or building stuff with our local school budget. That would be that with our school budget, our local county budget takes care of capital needs. We don't need to be raising money to do stuff like that. We need to be raising money for things instructional. Your local school budget, the money that you raise should go to support the school improvement plan, the academic initiatives of your school, period. Other groups can raise money if they want air conditioners or want a closet or something that. You need to focus on instruction. You get hired, and will keep from getting fired by making a good number go up or a bad number go down. Student achievement. So you need to focus, and you need to understand the difference between budgeting and accounting. A budget is about priorities. Accounting is just about accountability, about how you spend it, tracking it. Also, you need to understand you can't cross streams of money. You can't put them together. They have specific things. Federal obviously is the most restrictive, but I see principals try to take and collect up surplus amounts in different accounts and put them together. That is not legal. You can't cross those funding lines. Dr. Neal, you're with us tonight. You might want to talk about that. You've been working in some low wealth districts, and you've been a principal for a long time. You might want to speak to budgeting and how the money is spent and accounted for.
You do have your, of course, federal, state, and local money. You oftentimes don't have much control over the federal money. No. You may be given a Title I budget. Districts allot it differently. So you may be given some leeway on how to spend it, or they may completely dictate to you how to spend it. Sometimes you'll get a separate state allotment that can only be spent for certain things, and then you'll have your local allotment if they have one. Some districts don't have a local allotment that they give principals. So I've been in school districts where you have a lot of control over budget and money, and I've been in districts where the principal has very little. But your best friend needs to be someone in finance. And even though sometimes those people are cranky, you need to be nice to them.
Yeah.
but they answer all the questions. And it's not that they hold control, but they will help you, more likely to help you if you're a lot nicer to them and patient with them. And then you'll also have like your general fund. Now, I have recently worked with a district that their board policies really controlled how much schools were able to spend their school money, like their fundraising money. I did not, until these past few years had seen or worked for a district where they really regulated even how you spent your general fund. So that's why it's super important to know and understand the way your district does things when it comes to money. And if you become, of course, an assistant principal first, try to learn as much from the principal as possible. But I'll tell you, some principals are very closed off on that information, and some are willing to share everything. So, but the one thing that new principals I hear say most often is, I don't understand budgets and I need help.
Yeah.
So, but it's super important to know what each district does and how they allow you to manipulate the money.
Exactly. And what Dr. Neal said, again, federal money is the most restrictive because it pays for programs and personnel. It would be the most restrictive. And then your state money, and then your local money. Again, I worked in one district that allotted us by enrollment money, local money, and I worked in one that didn't give you any. One of the things that I'm seeing more and more of, and I think is a really good thing, is district control of the local school raised money, the general fund. We will just call that the fourth category, the general fund. Assuring that principals are spending that money in support of their school improvement plan on the academic things, and not raising money to buy things with it that have nothing to do with academic achievement. That's one of the things that schools that don't work very well, that don't score very good, that's one of the things that they have in common. They don't spend their money very good. If now I may insult some of you in the room on this one, and if I do, you're grown, you'll grow out of it. When I drive down the road, I see people at the Dollar General buying groceries. But what kind of people are buy their groceries at the Dollar General? People that are on the lower end of the achievement scale, I would say. It's kind of the same way with schools. They don't spend their money wisely. They spend their money on trinkets and baubles and things and stuff that don't help with academic achievement. And then you wonder why they don't do very well achievement wise. Their kids don't learn or achieve very much. Well, there's a reason why. And so one of the things that, I've been doing a lot of PD, and I take no blame or no credit for this, but I've been called in some school districts lately. Since 2019, I've done at least one a year, sometimes two a year, where I go in and do the triangle with them on you got to spend your money, and you got to do your master schedule, and you've got to spend your money to support the school improvement plan. And I've done that, I think, 7 or 8 different districts across the state that have now seized upon the notion of the triangle. That's becoming more and more popular, is to monitor how principals schedule their schools and make sure that they're doing it based on achievement, on talent, and not on time, and how they spend their local money, their general fund, that they're not buying stuff with it. They're not just buying copy paper for teachers with it, which is the bane of our instructional, the copy machine is the bane of our instructional existence, worksheets. So yes, it's getting more and more restrictive, but again, you really need to know the difference between budgeting, the priorities budget's about setting priorities. Accounting is just keeping up with the money. Too many times administrators confuse the two. not understanding the most important piece is how you decide to spend your money and what you spend it on if you're trying to do achievement. Our other discussion board was about hiring. Let me pull that one up. Let me share my screen again. And thank you, Mindy, for this one. Mindy was our DB2 star this week. And so the thing that caught my eye on this one, she went through all the different steps in the hiring process. I love it. The only thing is I added these two at this step. You know, again, there's 9 steps. At this step, she went through step 7. At step 6, this is actually 6, 7, and 8. Reference checks, drug testing, and background checks. Who does them? How do you get them done? How do you get them scheduled? Who's responsible for those kinds of things? These are the kinds of things, and I want to highlight this one. These are the kinds of things that, I hate to say this, but I really don't, that if something goes wrong in your school or your district, everybody's going to be hunting somebody to blame as to why we didn't find out that this guy was a child molester, or we didn't find out that this person had a substance abuse problem until some emergency horrific incident happened at a school, and everybody starts looking as to how this one slipped through the cracks. And so it can't be one of those things where I thought you were going to do it and you thought I was going to do it. You need to make sure you know who does and who's responsible to follow up with each of those 9 things that has to happen when somebody gets hired. That's the thing. Now, as Dr. Neal said, it varies from district to district. There is no set rule or pattern on how this happens. Every district does it differently. The 9 things are the substance of the due process. The procedural is who does the 9. And you have to know who does what and who's responsible to follow through with it and make sure that it happens. Otherwise, you get yourself in trouble. So that's the hiring piece on 2. Now, employee assistance, we've talked about that a little bit. You need to know what employee assistance your district offers. Again, it's district by district. Some offer a little, some offer a lot. Again, it can work to your detriment as a principal. If somebody's an employee assistance, you can't let them go. You have to go with a day-to-day substitute. We've talked about that. That's aggravating. But you need to know, if you're trying to help somebody, what kind of services that you have, especially when we're trying to keep our people now. Maybe there's some services that we have in our district that can help them get through the rough patch that they're in so that we can keep them. So again, hiring, everybody does the same things. The issue is who does them. Everybody does not do the same thing in employee assistance. Let me say that again. Everybody does not do the same thing. You got to find out not only what your district offers, but who administers it. That's up to you to know. That it's not, you need to know who to direct people to on that one. All right, so that kind of covers our housekeeping for the evening, our stars of the week. Again, thank you, Mindy, Natalie, Beth, for being our stars of the week. Those of you who haven't finished your apps, I'll get that done. We have class the next 4 weeks. And so tonight, I'm glad that we have Dr. Neal with us. She called me today and said, should she come tonight? And I said, absolutely, you're the expert. Dr. Neal is our EC expert, so I'm glad she's with us tonight. But I'll start us off with exceptional children tonight. Let me share my screen. I want to make sure that you see the resources that we have, and we'll talk about them. If I can find my share button here. All right. So under this week, I can close that one there.
Now, Heather, you are also our current EC expert. So
yes,
you chime in
yeah,
anytime, because I'm probably a little rusty too.
Well,
you correct anything we say.
I'd like to pretend that I'm rusty, but I never knew anything to start with. So at least if you're rusty, it means that one time you knew something. All right, so I've got some links to the appropriate websites here. Here's one for IDA. Let's see. here it is. I checked all the links. One of them wasn't working, so I fixed it before class tonight. So here's our IDA, Individual Disabilities Education Act. If you don't know it, here's this. This will help you with that. I've got the one, the parent information. Now, the thing about it is, most parents will know more. Well, they always know more than me, but most parents may know as much or more than you do, because we have websites like this. It'd be a good idea for you to make sure you explore that so you know what they know. So I've got the link in here to the parent website. I've also got the link to FERPA, the Privacy Act, that guides how we can deal with this. This is where you get sued a lot. Josh Shane, if he were here with us tonight, Josh worked in Lincoln County with Dr. Neal. I think Josh might have been an AP for her at one time, or at least I probably supervised him, but knows Josh. But he's been involved in a lawsuit for quite a while over, he was named because two of his teachers were talking about a EC kid in the hallway, and a third teacher overheard him and told that child's parent. I mean, something as simple as that. So if you're not familiar with FERPA, the privacy laws, my point is, it's not just paperwork. It's also other things. You need to be very, very clear in how FERPA works. I was in a public separate school that I supervised. It was part of my group of schools that I supervised when I was one of my jobs in the central office in CMS, and I was sitting in the waiting room waiting on the principal. I was in the front reception area, and the door was open to the teacher's lounge, and I heard folks talking about kids. I was in a public separate where every kid in the building was an EC kid. So I shouldn't have been here and talk about any kid, whether they were EC or not, but especially not in a public separate school. That was all exceptional children. And they were carrying on a conversation about kids that anybody in the public could hear. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about. So if you don't know the privacy laws, you need to make sure that you get in on that. And so it's not just documents. It's not just how you handle documents. It's how you handle information as well. Heather, I'll again, we talked earlier, we knew that you were an expert. You might want to chime in on that one in terms of how folks ought to comport themselves in terms of, I mean, the document piece of it.
Well, first, back to the parent rights part. There's a parent rights handbook that should be offered at every IEP meeting. So if you're an LEA rep, you need to make sure that happens. The parents don't have to accept it. And it's a state handbook, and I don't think it's changed in like 10 years. It's not something that's updated very often, but it is supposed to be offered at each IEP meeting. But yeah, if just using common sense as far as the confidentiality, if you wouldn't say it to the parent, then don't say it, in public, or even, like you said, teachers talking in the staff lounge or wherever. And as far as the paperwork, if you're participating in an IEP meeting, you are essentially at the end signing the paperwork. It is a legal document. You can disagree with the IEP team, and there's protocols that can happen with that, but you are signing that you were part of the team, whether you're the LEA rep or even as a reg ed teacher. And then you're responsible for those accommodations and different things like that. And then, of course, the paperwork should be kept in their IEP folder, which is always supposed to be in a secure location. Does that cover it? I don't know what specific.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is just a conversation. We'll talk about more things. Now, one of the things that I'll go ahead and caution you about now, when you become an assistant principal, you'll be the low person on the totem pole. You'll become the LEA rep. Mm-hmm. I would encourage you now to understand that you need to, as the LEA rep, you'll need to start scripting those meetings about what went on. That will be a requirement that you will have. Obviously, you can't record them because of privacy, but you'll need to take notes and script those IAP meetings. Now, as the LEA rep, you're kind of too many times we think, well, the EC staff put all the paperwork together, they're in charge. No, again, as Heather said, all decisions are collaborative, but you're kind of the arbiter or the umpire as the LEA rep. And if you don't know something, well, number one, if you script, you'll be paying attention to what's said. I can't tell you the number of times as somebody that was under my bailiwick in the central office, I would say to somebody, why in the world did you agree? Well, I wasn't really paying attention. I didn't really know what I was agreeing to as the LEA rep. We don't offer that in this district. Well, I guess we do now since you agreed to it in the IAP. We'll just have to take that out of your check. So again, you need to learn to script these things so that you're paying attention. And if you don't know something, it's not against the rules to pause it and come back and meet at a later time or recess for a while until you can figure it out. But don't promise things that cost money if you don't know whether the district can afford it or will afford it. Because once you make that promise, it becomes a legal contract. That's the biggest thing.
Going along with that, a lot of times at the end, you go over your prior written notice. And sometimes that kind of gets glossed over because it is a summary of your meeting. You really do need to look at that because that is the first thing that the state pulls when they're auditing folders and things. I mean, and that should be, even if you weren't at the meeting, you should be able to look at that and figure out, you should be able to tell what happened, what decisions were made, and kind of even why, if it's written the right way. But that is something, after you're sitting in a long meeting, a lot of times it's kind of glossed over a little bit, but that is something that you're signing as well. So.
Yep. That's what I'm talking about. You need to learn to script these things and know what's happening, what's going on. That's very important. What did you agree to? Because the district is responsible to follow through with that. And if you promised homebound and you don't have the resources to do homebound, it's not going to go well for you. All right. Now, I've got a PowerPoint tonight. I hate PowerPoints. You know that. And so I'm just going to point it out. I'm not going to actually read it. So I never know at what level, most of you people know more than I do, but I never know what level that we are. The two major theoretical frameworks for exceptional children is either an inclusion model, which is a push-in model where we push the staff in to work with kids in the regular setting, or a mainstreaming where they go to some classes with everybody else, but they're pulled out for others. If you don't know the two models, this slideshow is 63 slides long, but it's worth your time if you're not expert at knowing the different models and the two different and the advantages and disadvantages of each. This is a wonderful PowerPoint. Don't quote me that I said any PowerPoint was wonderful, but this is a good one that will school you on the difference between the inclusion model and the mainstreaming model. Now, one of the things that I do hear a lot from folks out in the field is that they can't understand why the inclusion model in many places replace the mainstreaming model because they don't think it's as efficacious. It doesn't work as good. And that's when I remind them the point of the inclusion model was not to offer better services. It was to offer adequate services at a better price. It costs 30% less than the mainstreaming model, and that's why it's been adopted. So you can't get caught up in this doesn't work as well. Well, it was never intended to work as well. It was intended to meet the letter of the law and cost a lot less money. And so that's part of that being an LEA rep as well. Too many times, especially if you've been in it for a minute, you think about what they ought to be getting under that mainstreaming model versus what they should be getting under the inclusion model. So this is a good primer for that as well. Students do not get as much in the inclusion model, but they get the letter of the law. So if you're not familiar with inclusion versus mainstreaming, this will be a good one. Now, the heart of our instruction for tonight is the other PowerPoint. And this one Dr. Sain made for me or for us. And this is a quick and dirty primer. We will work through this one tonight. What you should know at your level, stepping into this is designed for you at your first administrative job. This PowerPoint was designed for you as the novice LEA person. So here we go. You need to know what a free and appropriate education is for all children. And here are a couple things. Between the ages of 3 and 21, they're eligible until their 22nd birthday. All students, as they transition from grade to grade, too many times folks in high school think they don't have to do this. They do. It stays with the kid. It's not a grade level or school specific designation. A free and appropriate education travels with the kid, and even kids who are in locked facilities. Now, this also goes with child finds, which is next, and this is the one that kind of blows people's minds. Even if they aren't in your school, even if they're at a charter or private school, if they're in your attendance zone, you are responsible to find them and make sure that they are getting services. Let me say that again. Even if they're not enrolled in your school, if they are in your attendance boundary, if they're over at the local private school or the local charter school, you have to make sure that they're getting services. Now, let's stop on that one for a minute. Charter schools. Charter schools are public schools. However, and I want Dr. Neal to address this, not all of them have a full array of exceptional children's services. So, Dr. Neal, if I've got a child who's autistic and I go over to the local charter school and they've got specific learning disability, they've got a teacher over there for that. Can they meet my needs over there if I've got an autistic child?
Probably not. Well, it just depends, varying degrees, but it's the parent's choice though to make that, but it doesn't mean that we have to go in and offer the full the whole.
We don't have to
plan
offer
of
everything at the
services.
charter school.
No.
Basically, all we have to offer there is specific learning disability. That's pretty much it. And if you choose to go over there, we don't have to provide you an autistic teacher, not at the public charter.
Nope.
We just have to
Because
have the
that's-
basic stuff.
Right. You might have to provide the evaluation and
Yeah, you have to do the
sometimes-
functional. You might have to do you might have to do a functional behavior assessment, Deck 5. You might have to do the updated psychological or IEP. You might have to do some of the paperwork. But
yeah,
as long
but
as
you don't have to offer the services.
that is correct. As long as you have, there's like one baseline teacher over there, so that can do all that paperwork and keep up with the evals and reevals and those things. As long as they've got one, they don't have to have one for every specific disability.
Right. Heather, do y'all have any charter schools that y'all have to compete with?
We don't have any charter schools, but we do have a private Christian school that's starting to become, it's expanding a lot, actually. It's part of our enrollment problem in our district. And I think one of our biggest things, especially going back to FAPE, is the 3-year-olds, like the preschool age kids.
Yeah.
Especially our speech therapists have to go to those daycares and those preschools. So it adds a whole other, you got to factor in travel time and all the other things, and they're stretched pretty thin in our district, but
Yes.
no, we don't have any charter schools.
We had an interesting, I think, ethical dilemma where a private school try to get a lot of students identified as EC because then they could receive the state voucher
Mm.
for educating private schools for EC students. And they wanted to identify everybody and use our services to identify everybody and tell parents, well, if you're identified, then you can get a $7,500 check that helps with the tuition. And that became a big ethical dilemma.
Yeah, I see that that's probably the direction we're about to go in with that private school. Right now they just are not accepting students with special needs, because they're a private school, they
They're
could
private, they
control
don't have to.
who they could
True.
accept, which
Yeah.
is personally one of my biggest issues with it. But they're kind of just not accepting those students, but they're getting ready to build a way bigger building, and every year they're adding grades and all the things. So I think in their 5-year plan, it's going to be to include more special education services. So I think we'll probably get tasked with testing and providing some of that. But yeah.
And Mindy, you want to share what you put in the chat?
I can. So my oldest son, he's 17 now. He was diagnosed with autism when he was 6. So it was a pretty late diagnosis, and he went to a charter school, and they were eventually the ones that helped get him the diagnosis. And I never even knew what a parent handbook was the first like 3 years of him being diagnosed on the spectrum. And it wasn't until we switched to the school we're at now when I was handed a handbook and had no idea what it was. And I think that that was after I had gotten my degree. And I don't think, general ed teachers they don't have enough special education training in their program. And I know so much about it now because I've attended so many of his IEP meetings, and now I attend all the ones as a gen ed teacher. But yeah, we were never given it at the charter school that they originally went to.
Yeah, that's unfortunately probably not surprising.
So the issue here is charters and privates. Charters only have, even though they're public, they only have to have a baseline. They only have to basically have one person, so that can keep up with the paperwork. Privates are not required to have anything or anybody. And that's why, just like on that slide, that's the one that we have to be most concerned about, is even if they're in private school, if they're in our attendance, we're responsible to find them and make sure that they're getting services, or at least that they're offered services. Now, let's talk about the difference in that. What is it? What are you saying, Dale? That or do we have to give them service, or do we just have to offer them the services? But again, the onus is on them to accept them and to find a way to get them. We don't have to go over and send a teacher to the private school. They would have to get their kid over to us. Yeah. So we could say, we locate the kid, we tell the parent, we have these services over at our school if you want to come over. But now we're not going to send somebody over to the private school. That's not how this works. But that's what Child Find is, and it's kind of it's a burden. I won't pull your leg. It's a burden, but you better make sure that that you understand how it works and the difference between charters and privates, and what the responsibility is for the kids that are in your attendance zone that are not in your building. They are your problem. That's the whole notion of Child Find. They do encumber responsibility for you. I hate to tell you that, but it's just the truth. All right. Least restrictive environment. We get in this a lot with discipline, with kids that are having not so much learning problems as behavior problems. And so when kids get in trouble and we have to do We have to discipline EC kids. You know, we have a number of things that we have to do, and manifestation determination, functional behavior assessment, behavior intervention plan, updated psychological, updated IEP. You know, we're trying to determine if the kid's behavior is a manifestation of their disability or if they're just bad, BAD. And so, least restrictive environment comes in on that one a lot on behavior, that the law says we have to put them in least restrictive. And that's a problem if they're out loose, they're disrupting school and harming themselves or others. And so that's another one of those that you need to understand fully what it means. It doesn't mean that parents get to pick where their kids go to school, and a lot of folks think that that's what that means. It does not. You need to know what it means. Continuum of alternative placement. Make sure that you have regular classes, special schools, home instruction in hospitals and institutions. You have to have a continuum of placement. That's what I was talking about. I was in a public separate. Public is a special school. That would be a public separate. That meant that every kid there, to be there, they had to be identified as an EC kid. But that's continuum of alternative placements. Placements decisions, again, has to be a team meeting. Now, we get into this when I get asked all the time. What if the parent just won't go along? And so I'm going to let Dr. Neal, and I'll be the bad. I'm always the bad example, so I'll go last. Dr. Neal and Heather are going to both talk to us about, we're having an IEP meeting, and the parent just won't go along. What do?
Well, it's actually up to the LEA rep to make the final decision. But let me just warn you that if it becomes that contentious, you should probably pause the meeting or take a break from it and ask to reconvene again to have some discussions, because this has happened. This is where lawsuits happen very often.
There you go.
And you have got to be super careful, and don't ever say we don't offer that service or we don't offer that placement.
Right.
Whatever you do, because I did it as an EC person, knowing, and it almost got me in a lot of trouble too. So don't ever say, well, we don't offer inclusion. We don't do that here. Don't say it. Just don't. And don't make, even though everybody probably has an idea of what placement they want to offer, don't make that decision before the meeting. You know, you can have discussions about pros and cons of the different placements, but legally you are not to make that decision until that meeting. Heather, what do you want to add to that?
I don't really have anything to add. Like you said, it's in your benefit if the parent agrees. It makes it a lot easier. Sometimes the parents don't understand, or they need some more time. So like you said, you know, being willing to reconvene. Thankfully, I haven't really encountered this one personally. So.
And if it becomes that contentious too, you need to get the EC director, the EC coordinator, whoever is in the central office to help you navigate that process.
And so I teach, I've taught resource before, but now I teach in a separate class. And so some of my students come to me, you know, straight into kindergarten, they're placed with me, but then some, of course, start Reg Ed, because I teach K through 5. And I think sometimes we've had some discussions where the parents aren't necessarily on board. And as a team, we'll say, okay, well, we're going to try Reg Ed and we're going to reconvene after the first 9 weeks based on that child's progress. So therefore, you're giving them, you know, a chance, but you're also saying like, hey, we're going to re-meet with data on how they are doing. And then, you know, and a lot of times, that works and we re-meet and they maybe aren't doing well and the parents like, okay, I'm ready for them to
Right.
join or to have a different placement.
Yes.
So I think the
That's-
more you're able to kind of put that parent perspective in your head, it just helps in general. You know, they're hit with a lot of information at IEP meetings.
That's very true. Hey, Beth, what you want to add?
So, I have the crazy example, with the placement. So, my very first IEP meeting ever as a first-year teacher, I walked into, and it was a placement issue, and there were lawyers on both sides with tape recorders going in the middle of the table. No heads up warning either. So I show up at the meeting and I was told, just answer only what they directly ask you, only about her classwork. That is it. So if this is an issue as an administrator, give the teacher coming into the meeting a heads up before they show up to know that you don't say anything about the placement. And the issue was the parents, so this crazy world, the parents wanted to send the kid to a private boarding school and they didn't want to have to pay. So they were trying to make it,
Yeah,
so they wanted to say that we weren't offering
a
her
continuum of services. Yeah,
the services, and they lost, but I mean, it got to the point where it was a lawsuit, and
yeah.
so interesting times.
Yes. So the bottom line here is this is not the hill you want to die on at the school level. Don't ever say we're going to make this decision like it or lump it. Don't do that at the school level. That needs to be a district level decision that we're going to saddle up and go to court. This is not the hill you die on at the school level. If the parent doesn't go along, then we pause the meeting, as Heather said, but we do not ever say, this is what we're going to do, not at the school level. That's got to be a district decision all the way up to superintendent that we're willing to go to court on this one. You know, this is not your hill. Not at the school level. Not your hill. Not your circus, not your monkeys. You need to let somebody else be involved in this one. And Beth is exactly right. Sometimes we walk teachers into this and we don't prep them. If you got anything that's on the extraordinary, you better make sure that everybody knows what's happening when they walk in, because somebody might say something they ought not. Like, we don't offer that. Oh, that won't go well. And a lot of times, a lot of the lawsuits are over continuum of services. I want this, y'all don't offer it. You got to pay for me to go get it. That was 90% of what we had in CMS, is wanting somebody to pay for what they wanted. And so they would always be arguing continuum of services. So that meant that no matter what you offered them at the school level, that wasn't what they wanted. So they weren't going to agree. So we pretty much, as a district, had to understand and say, we're not going to make any of these decisions at the school level, because that's not what they want. Or if we do make a decision, it's promising them that we'll buy them something somewhere else. So we had to get out of that. So again, pause the meeting. That's not your hill at the school level, especially as the lowly LEA rep. Understand, what your role is there. You're pretty much just you're the umpire. You don't make the big decisions. That's not your role. All right. Who's the IEP team? All right. This is the one that gets you in trouble more than anything else, on something that you just absolutely had no intention of being illegal over, but you'll get throttled over. You got a meeting scheduled, everything's going well, and your regular ed teacher doesn't show up for whatever reason. And you see another third grade teacher running down the hall, and you grab them and put them in the room, because kids in the third grade, this is a third grade teacher, regular ed. Is that legal? Absolutely not. Knowledgeable about the child. That means if this teacher does not teach that child, That's a FERPA violation to even put them in the room. How many times have we done that? Grabbed just whatever reg ed teacher was handy. And then later on in review, when we didn't give them what they wanted, they took that as a stick and just beat the tar out of us with it. I'll just tell you right now, and you can't win that one. Whatever they want after that, they get. Whatever they want, they get. So if the third grade teacher for that kid doesn't show up, then we pause, or we delay, or we postpone the meeting. We don't just grab a third grade teacher. That's not how this works. That's the biggest mistake I see folks make. They think that regular ed teachers are interchangeable. They are not. Don't make that mistake. Children in private schools, we talked about this one. This goes back to child fine. Must locate, identify, and evaluate all children with disabilities enrolled by parents in private schools is what we were talking about earlier. Make sure you understand that. Just because they didn't show up at your school doesn't mean that you aren't responsible. Again, you don't get the same thing. You can come over to our school and get what you want, but we don't have to bring it to you. That's what this means. We don't have to take it over to them. They have to come and get it at our place. Parental consent, we've talked about this one. LEA must provide notice before conducting evaluation. Parental consent for evaluation is not consent for services. Now, this takes us down that highway to MTSS. What is the MTSS highway? Multiple tier system of support is the 90 before the 90. Well, what in the world is the 90, and what's 90 before 90? All right. Once a child has been referred for exceptional children's services, there's a 90-day, 3-tier, 30-day where you collect anecdotal, try an intervention, and do another intervention. At the end of the 90 days, you make a decision whether to test a kid for EC. And again, parent permission to start the process is not the same as starting the services. But in North Carolina, most specifically, now you have to have the 90 before the 90. Now, that's state funded and local funded, not federal. You do the same thing twice, basically. You do it for 90 days on the state and local dollar, then you do it 90 more if they're not on the federal dollar. The thing to remember about MTSS is the state calls that a school-based committee, SBC. SBC, school-based committee. Why is that important? It means the principal's the one responsible and the administrative team. EC, that's federal. Who's on the hook for that? That would be the EC director, the EC chair, those people, making sure the evaluations get done, the paperwork, functional behavior, all the stuff that you might have to do, the Deck 5 series, all those things. Now, on the intervention team, the MTSS team, there'll usually be an EC teacher, but they're not the person in charge. They're not the person responsible. If all the benchmarks aren't hit on the 90 before the 90 during the MTSS phase, that comes to roost at the principal, because the state has clearly defined intervention as a school-based committee under the responsibility of the school principal and administration. So you say, well, we won't worry if they get it, fine. If they don't, fine. Well, they said we had to have this MTSS, had to do these 3 tiers. We don't really have the time or the interest or the inclination to do that until you get sued. And then when you think the EC people are going to show up and defend you, they won't even be in the same zip code as you, because it's not that they're not the people responsible. Understanding that MTSS is basically the same 90-day process as we would put a child through that's been referred for EC prior to making a testing decision. And you are responsible for it as a principal. So, and it works pretty much the same way as EC does. Same rules apply. even to the point where kids in the MTSS process get the same protections of those as that would be in the 90-day identification process. They get the same protections. So you've got to know the 90 before the 90 is up to you. And you got to know what the 90 is on both of them. Again, traditionally, the first 30 days is anecdotal. We're collecting information on the kid. The second 30 days is the first level intervention. The second 30 days, the third 30 days is usually either a continuation of the first intervention if it's working, or a second intervention. And then if none of that works, then we go to we do the same thing basically again when we start the EC process, but we try a different intervention. So understanding MTSS mirrors the 90-day identification process for EC. The difference being, one, you're responsible for; the other, the district and the EC people, the federal people, are responsible for. Just got to know the difference. Now, what is the school principal and administration's responsibility to make sure that those scripted intervention lessons are delivered? Now, EC, none. But what about MTSS? It is your responsibility to make sure that those scripted intervention lessons are in fact being taught with fidelity. You don't have to do that in EC. They have compliance technicians, they have chairs, they have people that do that. You don't have that group. You don't have that support system. You don't have that support system for MTSS. You and your team has to make sure you get in the rooms and make sure that those intervention lessons are being delivered with fidelity. It's a lot of work, but you have to do it. It's up to you. It is not the EC department's responsibility. Although it looks like what they do, it is not what they do. So everybody needs to understand that. All right.
To go along with that, you need to make sure that the interventions are matching what you're going to request testing for. So don't just give math interventions and then request reading and math testing. We ran into that a few years ago in our district, but we've gotten a lot better with that. But that would be something that I would caution. And then, of course, not only are you doing the interventions, you better have the data, because on the EC part of it, when our 90 days start, we have to enter in all of that information. So
that would be your anecdotals.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you have to have all that anecdotal information, all of your data to enter in. You collect that during the first 30 days. But that's exactly right. That's why I said you can't just go out and do random. You got to make sure the proper interventions are being delivered with fidelity, the ones that have been diagnosed and scripted.
And a lot of that goes to where we've gone away from, with the SLD category, we've gone away from the discrepancy model. So it used to be that we would go it had to be 15 points difference, and that had to do with their IQ and then their educational performance. But now we don't do that in North Carolina, and we're able to place them differently. So that's where that data is even more important, because we use it to justify placement with the SLD category.
Yeah, no longer use that discrepancy model, IQ and performance. And so it's more important than ever that you make sure that the proper instruction is being done and the corresponding proper assessments being done. The EC folks do that. They won't do that for you. You have to do that for yourself. It's not that they don't love you. It's just that that's not their role. They're federally paid. Intervention is a state initiative, different payroll, different responsibilities. But because it's the same kids, the lines get blurred. Well, the state has unblurred the lines for you. You're responsible, lock, stock, and barrel, for intervention, period. So you need to know that. And Heather made, again, a much more eloquent point that I was trying to say is you got to make sure that the right lessons, the scripted lessons, the ones that are supposed to be delivered, is this the right lesson? Is this the right intervention? And then, of course, the right assessment that goes along with it. As you said, can't just do lessons on reading and then test them on reading and math. It's not the way it works. We have to make sure that all this stuff, there's an alignment to all this stuff, that we're doing it with fidelity. We're testing what we teach. We're teaching the appropriate scripted lessons, which means this is what the intervention says they need, and this is the lesson. Is that the lesson that they're getting? And then is the assessment matching the lesson? That's the whole fidelity piece. Very good. Parental, this is all about prior written notice, all those things, parental consent, referrals. Referrals are written. In 2014, 11 principals were either fired or demoted in Charlotte Mecklenburg the week before school because they weren't doing the referrals. They were racially identifiable. Black males were being referred one week and tested the next. There was no process in between the referral and the actual testing. There must be 90 days. Now in North Carolina, there must be the 90 before the 90 and before a kid could be tested. Being referred it puts them into the system to go through the process, not just to get tested. Now, I always have somebody in the back, some smart guy in the back always asks, well, what if the parent requests the testing? Don't do it. Heather, speak to that.
Okay, so if a parent requests testing, you do have to meet as an IEP team to acknowledge their request, but you do not have to agree to test them.
Don't do it. That's exactly right. Then you have to acknowledge the request. I would
Right.
not do it.
But
I just wouldn't.
and typically, I mean, I've been in a situation where it was at a different school than I teach at now, but we did go with the parent request. They didn't qualify. I mean, when the testing was over with, they didn't qualify. So you're just wasting your resources. But yeah, you do have to acknowledge and, acknowledge the request. And I'm pretty sure you have to have an IEP team meeting
Yeah.
to acknowledge that. But you don't have to, just because they requested it, you do not have to do the testing.
Well, here's the deal. Resources. Heather hit the nail on the head. If you do it for one, you pretty much got to do it for everybody. And then it gets started. I worked in a district early in my career, a rural district. And now this is not, well, I've seen both ends of this. Where we used AIG, where all the parents would come in and demand their kids be tested for AIG. No anecdotes, no nothing. And it drove us crazy. But I've also been in the district again where they were in Charlotte Mecklenburg, where they were getting money. They were getting those checks. And they'd come in every week. And if they didn't place in last week, they'd come in the next week, want them tested again. And the previous principal where I was had done that regularly. And it was a local cottage industry to get money. And so we didn't have time to actually deliver any services because we were testing all the time. And I had to find, we're not testing anybody. Yeah, we don't have any, we don't have enough resource to even teach classes because we're testing all the time. Because they wanted that money. And so, yes, you must meet, you must discuss it, you must in the IET, but I would not do an on request testing. It will burn up all of your resources. And it's hard to not be arbitrary. I mean, the two standards that we have in law are arbitrary and capricious. Arbitrary is me and Andrew are out back behind the gym smoking. And Anne Marie catches us. She's the assistant principal. Now, so when Anne Marie catches me and Andrew, she sends Andrew back to class and she turns around and shoots me. Bang, dead, graveyard dead. That would be arbitrary and capricious. Arbitrary in that she let Andrew go and she punished me. Capricious in the fact that I know smoking's bad for you, but I believe that might be a little harsh to shoot me over smoking. That's too much punishment for the crime. Those are the two legal standards that we have, arbitrary and capricious. The problem that you get into if you don't test everybody is if you test one and the next one you tell no, then they sue you for being arbitrary, and that happens. So it's either from my perspective, it's either all or nothing. Either you have to test them all, and that's what the principal prior to me was doing, or you don't do any, and that's what I did. Because our EC people said we're just swamped with testing. We don't have time to deliver services.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
So if you say you're kind of making it out to be like an all or nothing situation, what is the legality with that though? Because technically,
Don't
if
tell
the
everything you know.
okay, I was just making sure.
That falls under don't tell everything you know. Tell the
Okay.
IEP team we're not going to do this unless you have some compelling reason that I can go to court and defend when I get sued for not testing everybody. If you've got a compelling reason, fine. But just because the parent said so, and you don't have some compelling reason, then the default is no, rather than the default being yes.
But let me just warn you, if the parent puts that in writing, you have to meet.
Yeah.
So you don't have to maybe agree to test, but you do have to meet, and you have to document that the date you received it and the meeting, you have to document all of it. So
And what I would tell them is if there is a compelling, the default is no, rather than the default is yes. You understand the difference there? If they have a compelling reason, then we're going to do it. But then we're okay in court because we had a compelling reason. When we get sued for being arbitrary by the next parents because we told them no, because they didn't have a compelling reason, here was our compelling reason. The default was set on yes when I got there. I set it on no. That didn't mean that we never tested a parent recommendation, but they had to have a compelling reason that we could legally defend when we got sued for being arbitrary. You know, giving somebody something you didn't give somebody else, that you didn't treat everybody equitably. And if there was a compelling reason, yeah, we could do that. And we tested one every now and then, not many. But the previous principal had set the default to yes because he didn't want to get sued at all. You know, we just tell everybody yes, and didn't care that it was burning up all the EC people wanted to shoot him. They wanted to borrow Anne Marie's gun to shoot him. There was a reason why he was the former principal. They hated him. Everybody did. I mean, you know, you make decisions like that. At some point, you got to protect your staff a little bit. And so, yeah, I inherited that one at Eastway. But again, you do have to have the meeting. You have the IEP you consider, but it can't just be because mama said so. There has to be a compelling reason, educational reason why you would do it. Other than mama wanted it done. They were doing it Eastway because they were getting a check. That's not a compelling reason.
And sometimes you can explain to the parent what a 504 is, and sometimes they really just want those accommodations.
Yeah.
So
More
instead of
testing time,
services.
having it read to them, those kinds of things. 504 is for disadvantaged and disadvantaged kids, and generally a lot of that's ADHD, not ADD, ADHD, which is a medical diagnosis. ADD is just being bad behavior. ADHD is an actual medical diagnosis. A lot of those kids just need extra time because they have trouble, obviously, with their attention and focus. And so, yes, if you can do accommodations, that generally waylays a lot of that, wanting them to get tested for EC, unless again, it's a financial thing, and then they all want to do it. Initial evaluations, you have to do the full before. There's no abbreviated, there's no quick. You have to put them through the full battery. And it has to be completed within 90 days of receipt of the written referral. And so again, that's the 90. Evaluation procedures: when conducting evaluations, provide notice, variety of assessments, not use any one single measure. And that's what Heather was talking about. When we were doing the discrepancy model, that was the only measure, was the discrepancy between IQ and performance. It had to be 15 points or more. Use sound instruments. Now we do, and that's people say, well, why did we get away with that? That was completely objective, and it was easy to defend. Well, because it was a single measure. That's why. And we can't do that. So that's why we had to get away from the discrepancy model. Required screening is evaluation and eligibility determination. Should always ensure all requirements have been met in any area being considered. And so here are all the different ones, the 14 different types of exceptional children placements. Reevals, oh my Lord. All right, Heather, smile. Heather, in your experience, what's the biggest problem with reevals? You know the IEPs have to be renewed. You have to do reevaluations. Heather, how often you have to do that?
Reevals are every 3 years.
Correct.
Unless they are placed in the developmentally delayed category, then you have to change their category by the time they turn 8 years old.
Yeah.
So.
All right, what's the problem? Got 3 years. Doesn't seem like that big. How can we be up against timelines and deadlines all the time if you got 3 whole years to do this?
Go ahead, Dr. Neal. I mean, personally, it's like a never-ending cycle, and you're always testing, and it's the same. You're using the same resources for your initials as your reevals. And you do have to, so I do want to say that with the reevals, you don't have to test. The IEP team can decide to update the reeval without further testing. But that's kind of a sticky situation too. And that's really where your school psychologist or whoever's in charge of starting the testing would kind of come in.
She just hit the nail on the head. Dr. Neal?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want to follow the psychologist's lead, but you do have to you do have to test when you're moving from a DD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You want to get a different diagnosis after the age of 7. So
yep.
That's in these are North Carolina too. Some, even though every state does interpret the federal law differently, just to let my South Carolina people know, I don't know what they do in South Carolina for developmentally delayed and for DD under the age of 7 either. So just want to put that out there. Some of these things could be a little bit different.
Yeah, they vary from state to state, but that one I think is pretty consistent. Now, when I say Heather hit the nail on the head, the problem with reevals is school psychologists.
Yeah, there are none.
There you go. So my niece is 31. My brother-in-law, the idiot, had kids late, so his oldest daughter's only 31. When she was in school, let's see, she graduated from high school in 2011. Yeah, that's right, 2011. And her first thought, or her thought at that time, was that she would end up as a school psychologist. But at that same time in 2011, what did the General Assembly do? They cut $60 million and on an ongoing basis out of the budget for school counselors and psychologists. And so that was 13 years ago. And we've been on a downhill slide for the last 13 years on the number of school psychologists that we have. So a lot of places are having to do private contracting. And so my niece does her company does private contracting. That's what she does. And she makes a lot more money than she would have made as a school psychologist, being a psychologist private to do all these things. Because, you know, we decided to get out of that business. But the problem is we need them to do our reevals, and we don't have them. And then we have either one for 1 million kids, or we have to wait till the private people come. And that's why we're always up against a deadline, and it's always our hair's on fire. It's always we're running IEP meetings that with people in there that we shouldn't be, because we're in a hurry, because we're behind the 8 ball because of the lack of school psychologists. But we made a decision in this state 13 years ago to start cutting those out of the school budget, the state budget, for school psychologists and school counselors. And so now what few school counselors we have are doing testing. They don't actually counsel kids because we have to have them to do testing. But that was a conscious decision made in North Carolina to get rid of school counselors and psychologists. And it really shows up at reeval time. So that is a problem for us. Now, again, that's one of those things where you know your political skill and how well you're liked and the things that you can do and how well you can negotiate to get those people to your building. I hate for it to be that way, but that's just the truth. We've talked about MTSS and RTI. That's the 90 before the 90. Again, regular education, academic performance, their response to evidence-based intervention, rate of improvement, evidence of primary factors ruled out as the primary concern of academic difficulty. All right. That's the system now for placement. Development of an IEP. The IET team must consider the strengths of the child, parent concerns, results of initial or most recent eval, the needs of the child, and consider special factors like second language communication, behavior issues. IEP team should write the IEP. LEA reps should oversee the compliance at the meeting. This can't be one of those things where you come in and the EC teacher has written it and there just passes it out. Here it is. It has to be developed. It is a collaborative effort. I've seen that 1 million times. That's when you get parents that don't agree. You could have a template or you should have some suggestions, but it shouldn't be carved in stone. Review and revise the IEP at least annually. Make sure parents are informed. Regular ed teacher must participate. Again, it must be a collaborative effort. I've seen regular ed teachers be madder than parents when EC teachers come in and say, here's the IEP, and advise parents not to go along with it. And then, you know, that's never good. That usually leaves a mark, because then you got faculty members that are fighting. Procedural safeguards, due process for parents and children. Again, that's what we talked about, procedural, to make sure. Notice the procedural safeguards, everything that you're going to do, that you follow the established, you know, again, due process. What do we have to do? That would be the procedural. I mean, the substantive, and then do we follow it? That's the procedural. Right here it is. This is the substance, and then the procedure. And they include independent evaluations, prior written notice, parental consent, access to records, due process hearings to resolve complaints, the availability of mediation, child placement during due process. They're held, you know, that they get the same protections if they were already in the program. procedures for students who are subject to alternative education placement, civil action attorney's fees, all these things. These are procedural safeguards. Disciplinary procedures, case by case. Again, you have to determine whether a kid's behavior is a manifestation of their disability, you know, or they're just bad, BAD. There is a process, it's called manifestation determination. You do a functional behavior assessment, you do a behavior intervention plan, you do an updated psychological from the school psychologist. You have all these things that you must do in a 2-week period, Deck 5 paperwork, DEC 5, all those things. Now, you can see this slide looks different than the others because this is my slide. School administrators try everything in the world to avoid doing a manifestation determination because it takes time and it takes 2 weeks. It's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of things. So the law is that the kid has to be suspended out 10 days before you have to do a manifestation on their behavior. There's 2 problems with that. One is their definition of change in placement. Everything you see on the screen is a change of placement. If you do a rolling bump or that PBIS rolling where you move it from one teacher's room to the next, that'd be a change in placement. Bus suspension, change in placement. Out of school, in school suspension, detention. The rule is very clear, butt and seat. If his butt's not in his regular seat, that's a change in placement. That counts against your 10 days. Once that kid has had his placement changed for 10 days, then you must do a manifestation determination. Now, number 5. This is the one that gets us the most. This is the one that we have to pay out lawsuits the most on. And this is the one that we hear all the screams and yells about from the reg ed community. That kid is victimizing all of our kids over here. Why aren't you doing something? You move to an accelerated manifestation due to a pattern. If the kid does the same thing 3 times, I don't care if he's only had 2 days of intervention of whatever you did at change of placement. If the 3rd time he does the same thing, you move to manifestation determination. You can't let him continue to victimize people in your building. So the 3rd fist fight he gets in, he wins the jackpot. He starts the manifestation determination. We say, well, I've only suspended him 2 days. I still got 8 more days. That's not how it works. Not how it works. If the kid is showing a pattern of behavior, you better do a manifestation. Because what manifestation is that manifesting his disability, which generally manifests in a pattern. Duh. And so I can't tell you the number of times that I've had to deal with school administrators. And I said, this is the 7th time this kid has done this. Well, I still got 3 more days. But all the parents wanting to lynch you and shoot me because I'm in charge of you. You can't be this. We both can't be this dumb and you work for me. So one of us has got to go. Understand, if the kid's butt is not in his seat over a disciplinary incident, that counts as a day. When you get to 10, you got to do manifestation determination. If the kid has if the reason why his butt's not in his seat is the same thing on the 3rd time, then he goes to the front of the line. Anybody have any questions on that? All right, manifestation determination. Conduct a functional behavior assessment and implement a behavior intervention plan. It's already been created. You modify it. You address it. Return a child to their original placement unless the IEP team addresses the change in placement or due to special circumstances. Minimum expectation. Always refer to policies governing services for children. Know your district's interpretation of EDCI policy. That's what Dr. Neal was talking about. Know your district's specific interpretation. When you're unsure, ask questions. Again, stop, pause. Don't keep going. Do not keep going. You can pause, you can stop. Don't promise anything. Be scripted. Know what you're agreeing to along the way. Know what's happening. Don't grab somebody out of the hallway so that you won't have to postpone. Be proactive and be prepared. If there are concerns in the IEP meeting and you're unsure how to proceed, stop the meeting. What did the doctor tell me when I told him it hurt when I rolled my shoulder like that? He said, quit it. Stop. Don't do that. Make sure every effort attempt to keep parents involved. Each child disability is unique. Don't expect a playbook of how to support the student. All righty. Dealing with EC programs are difficult. They're hard. Again, I'll try to stay off my soapbox because we're winding our time down here. I think one of the things that bothers me the most right now is replacing all these kids as autistic that are not autistic. Autistic kids are generally high functioning. We're putting kids in with IQs of 60, 70, and 80. And because there's no stigma to autism like there is other things, we're not meeting their needs. I think that's a disgrace in our society, that in order to salve parents' conscience, we're not getting kids the help that they need. I see it daily. I talk to people in schools. I've been intimately involved in some organizations around that. I support autism and awareness and research and those things, but a lot of kids that are being placed now are not autistic, and they aren't getting the help that they need, and that makes me sad in our society, that we're malpracticing on kids because of parent pressure, because it salves their ego and their conscience to say that it's not me genetically that caused this kid's problems. It was a vaccine or something. It was as ridiculous as that, something external, rather than accepting this is my child, good or bad, they need help. This is not an indictment of me and my genetic code, but that's the way they see it. And so that's why we're placing all these kids autistic that are actually just specific learning disabled. That's a problem. But that's my overarching one. All right, Dr. Neal. Heather, thank you for playing along tonight. We always have somebody in here who knows more than me. Of course, that's not hard. Dr. Neal, I'll let you close us out tonight. What final words of wisdom do you have?
There are two things that will get you in the most trouble: money and EC.
Yep.
So just don't ever gamble with either one. That's my 2 cents.
There you go. All right. We'll see y'all all again next Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. Again, I read all your work. I really enjoy it. I learn stuff, and I always try to send you back a note in terms of your weekly assignments, the takeaways. And so hopefully you will find some value in them. We'll see you all next Tuesday. Thank you for playing along.
Bye, guys. Have a good week.